Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we have our usual roundup for the big stories around the world relevant to the Sikh community, and as several prime ministers around Europe, including the UK's Keir Starmer, join in to officially recognise the state of Palestine, the Sikh Federation asked him directly why he can't then recognise Khalistan. Will they get an answer? Well, we'll see. And the pressure piles on Governor Newsom to sign off the anti-transnational repression SB 509 in California. And in the UK, the reward is massively increased to catch the rapist of a Sikh woman last week. All this and more on today's show, but joining me, as always, is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and I just got in the door a long 7-hour drive back from the Ostrich Farm, so my apologies for being kind of casual today. I just had to rush in, get set, and slide into my seat. Didn't even get my coffee yet, so it's one of those mornings, but hey, it's all good. Angus, it was a great trip.
Indeed. Well, welcome back, James. And together, James and I will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And we will take a look at loads of your comments at the end of the show. So do stay tuned for that. Right, James, lots to get through today. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
The morning started out quite somber as the Canadian Food Inspection Agency was ready to cull all of those 400 ostriches on the farm out in the Cousineau region of British Columbia. And amazingly, I'm not much of a religious person per se. I don't pray, all of that sort of thing. But one thing that I noticed there was either timing, divine intervention, whatever you might have called it, because they did a big group prayer, about 30 people that just, doing their prayer thing. That's great. And not 30 seconds to a minute later, the phone rang and the Supreme Court had issued a stay of the cull order. So the Supreme Court will be looking at whether or not they will grant a leave of appeal for the ostrich farmers to keep them and to move forward. Now, of course, everybody understands the concept of what they call the stomp out policy. And it can be quite brutal in the fact that if a certain number of, any of your flock is infected with the H5N1, they come and they just basically stomp out the whole group. And that's what's happening here. However, the Supreme Court is moving forward to whether or not they granted the leave to file or to hear the appeal. That's still up in the air, but at least the ostriches now have another day in which to enjoy themselves, we'll say. This morning, just after that announcement came out, the mood went from one of sorrow and somber to one of jubilation and excitement. There was laughter, there were tears, there were just so much emotion of over 100 volunteers that have been really dedicating themselves to try and prevent the mass cull of these birds. So that was after a 4 a.m. Incident that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and the RCMP had brought in truckloads of hay to block the area from from a line of view for the farmers, the ostrich owners, and anybody else. And basically what had happened is that they wanted to keep people from seeing the actual process of culling. And that, I think, is more a humanitarian thing. I think that was the right call to make. However, 4 o'clock this morning, the dry hay went up in flames. And we don't know why that happened. We don't know what exactly it was. There was no lightning or anything. So maybe somebody snuck in and did that as a rebellious act. Or maybe it was just, unintentional. Somebody with a cigarette that, an ember flew or something. We don't know what happened there. But in any event, nobody was hurt. Nothing was damaged. The fire department for that town happens to be just at the end of the driveway, so it worked out well in that regard. But as we talk about that, let's take a look at what one of the owners was saying as everybody was gathering this morning. Can you hear that okay, Angus?
No, we don't seem to have any sound on that one, James. That's getting better.
Don't understand. People who think these are just why is it? Talk about that. I mean, you said he's raised.
Have you got sound now?
You might want to turn it up a little bit more, James. I don't think the audience can hear it. I certainly can't.
And my mom's hands touch them every day.
Better.
They trust us. So to get removed and to have a bunch of strangers in there going to look at them like their life means nothing. And when they looked at us for safety, we can't be there. It is the worst feeling in the world to watch them all falter and cry and crumble and say they're not your animals, they're mine. They are our animals. They're not the government's animals, they're our animals. We have deserved every opportunity to test these animals. Instead, we're paying millions of dollars for this big operation of helicopters, hundreds of police cars, LOA hotels. We're paying millions of dollars for drones and task force, and we're being treated like we are criminals. And this is, but yet we can't test one animal, not one animal on this farm that loses its life, that is living here 253 days healthy today. They're going to lose their life due to the Canadian Inspection Agency's flawed and failures in their system of their policy, broken policy.
So just a quick clip there, and that was one of the owners of the Universal Ostrich Farm, and she was quite upset. She actually went on to name about 20 or so of the ostriches, and yeah, it's just amazing how she keeps the names straight. And it was quite unique in the fact that it is a situation where it is really, it's on the cusp about this farm. They claim that it's non-commercial. They claim that it is non-food source, of course. But then still being the ostriches and such, they can still infect other birds and take that elsewhere. The reason I bring that up is because I think that is the biggest tie-in of all, is that when we look at the way that the food regulations work, they have an overreach, or a reach, I shouldn't say an overreach, but they do have a reach in order to make sure that the food safety is secure and safe and that it's consumable. If there is a threat to the food system, then of course they have an obligation to deal with it. Now, with that said, a part of the dealing with our food security is being a member of organizations like the United Nations, sorry, I totally forgot the name of it, but it's the Animal Health Agency regardless. And these are groups that Canada is a partner with. And this is really important to pay attention as to how these different problems that are arising in individual nations are having impacts on the global agreements that we have taken part in. If the Supreme Court comes back and allows the ostriches to live and to live out their lives and so forth, then of course we have to look at the impact that's going to have on our relationships with the international community. And that is a big deal, because when you consider the billions of dollars of trade every year within the food industry, that is significant, both imports and exports. And it also sets a framework for countries and sovereign nations such as Khalistan when it's formed. It's a matter of when they are entering into these agreements that the foreign nations such as Canada and the US and anybody else doing business with Khalistan as a sovereign nation will need to understand that there are a lot of complexities in the history of the formation of Khalistan, whether it's going back to the partition of 1947 or even prior to that with other agreements between the Sikhs and other groups. And why is that significant, you might ask? Well, because it's going to lay a foundation on the principles of trust and agreements that Khalistan signs with other nations. For countries such as Canada to back down and allow the ostriches to live without a significant dossier to put forward to the World Health Organization and the World Animal Health Organization, they will have some challenges there. However, if they do it in a responsible manner and present the best case decision that they've allowed the cull to be pulled, they've allowed the animals to live, and they're going to use them for research, for benefit, to try and understand the H5N1 and other avian influenzas to a better extent, which benefits the entire world. And when you look at that, as I said, Angus, that we have to really look at that because of the fact that if Khalistan's going to see us as a weak partner that doesn't follow through on our commitments, then of course they're going to be reluctant to sign type of trade agreements or pacts with Canada or defense agreements and so forth if they don't feel that we are going to be a reliable partner, which is essential for a newly found nation. As we see right now, and one of the stories you'll be touching on is about the Palestine issue right now, the recognition by many states And then you have, excuse me, then you have the Khalistan issue as well. So as we watch what happens with Palestine, that I think is going to have a lot of influence in how they handle the transition to recognize Khalistan when the time comes, and how the world will deal with it geopolitically. We know that there are some nations right now that disagree with the Palestine decision, but there are going to be other countries that disagree with Khalistan being a sovereign nation as well when it happens. So the important thing is to make sure that the foundation for trust, respect, and of course ongoing trust building. So we know that there is a history there between different nations, and if we can break that down and show that yes, we are good to our word, we will support you. We will get the same type of support back and forth when it comes to trade and safety and defense, all of that. But again, it just shows that with this Ostrich Farm, how much further reaching the ramifications of the decision either way. I mean, let's face it, nobody wants to see the destruction of these beautiful creatures either. But at the end of the day, we have to look at the global food supply. We have to look at the the wildlife safety and the safety and income of the other farmers. So it's going to set a huge precedent, Angus, in much more than just the food security. It's going to have long-lasting geopolitical agreement rollout or impacts as well, Angus.
Indeed, it's a tough one, this, really, because it's all about, well, whose rights are more important, or whose interests are more important? Is it the interests of the global supply chain, the global food supply? Does that trump the interests of the nation's interests? But do the nation's interests in turn trump those of the individuals? And above all, don't forget these are living creatures. What about their rights? So there's this almost hierarchy of rights, and whose rights are actually more important. And unfortunately, yes, when we look at the global supply chain of food that the world's population has to eat, and unfortunately big horrible decisions have to be made. What is more important, the lives of these birds or the fact that the world needs to eat? There's no right or wrong answer in that. Ultimately we all just have to survive one way or the other, and sadly these birds are really probably the lives of these birds are at the bottom of this rights chain, because you see how emotional the poor farmer is. I mean, of course any farmer losing livestock who they're attached to is going to be deeply upset, and they've poured literally their lives into rearing these birds, or whether it's animals or whatever, it's cattle or whatever, and then to be told by some faceless bureaucrat, we have to kill them. Because according to regulation XYZ.3, they've been diagnosed with a disease, despite the fact that on the face of it, it seems ridiculous. But ultimately, those regulations are in place to protect the global food chain. And that's unfortunately, and this is a prime example of where it just, it all starts to fall apart emotionally, because it just seems so unfair and so unjust. But ultimately, it's the international rights trump those of everything beneath that sort of that cascading chain of rights. So it's a tough one, and it reminds me also here in the UK we have a very similar issue with badgers of all creatures. Badgers have been accused by the government and our own food agencies of potentially carrying tuberculosis, TB, which can in turn affect cattle, which in turn then affects our food chain. So we've had these we've had all sorts of court cases, a very similar situation, huge court cases about sending in hunters to kill badgers, these beautiful creatures, wild creatures that we have here in the UK, that it still seems to be unproven, but there are hunters out there organised by the government, resourced by the government, to kill badgers in vast numbers, to cull badgers because they potentially can infect our cattle, which in turn affects the food chain, etc., etc. So again, these arguments just, I don't think they will ever end, James.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the things that really captured when I was there, and you look at these ostriches, first of all, they're tall. Like, they're taller than I am. They're probably like 6'6", between 6 feet and 6'6", some of them. Like, they're massive birds and long legs and that, and they're very playful and have a great time. But one of the things that caught me is just looking at them in the eyes, and they have eyelashes like people, and their eyes are just so similar to people that you almost feel a connection to them that way. And it's like, oh, you damn birds making me like you.
It's a tough one. It is a very tough one, especially if you're a farmer.
It is, and and it's really, it's a complex issue that takes a lot of navigating. And if the Supreme Court finds a way to help these farmers, great, but it's also going to set a precedence for every other farm that faces a cull order. So it's a delicate balance, Angus.
Indeed, and if you ever raise animals for food, the golden rule is never give them a name. That's always a huge mistake because you become too attached to then do the horrible deed at the end. So anyway, let's move on, James. And yes, indeed, we talked about Palestine. We touched on the subject of Palestine. It's a hugely emotive issue itself, and there's a very divisive, very polarising discussion. But the discussion of Palestine has of course reached a huge scale globally, and global leaders around the world have been torn in themselves, been polarised about pro or against the establishment or the recognition of a Palestinian state. Now, here in the UK, the Sikh Federation UK have actually piggybacked on this argument. And they've actually written a letter to our Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, because Keir Starmer, amongst many other leaders, national leaders, that includes particularly in Europe, Macron, but also in Australia and Canada. And there's an interesting tie between all those. They all tend to be globalist leaders, but that's another discussion. But they've all seemed to be united in officially recognising the state of Palestine. Now, this has caused a bit of a furore, a bit of a political furore from, well, I'll say globally. We all know Trump has absolutely, his ears are steaming with this recognition from his so-called allies, because, of course, he sits on the other side of the fence. But anyway, as a result of this, the Sikh Federation have thought, okay, we've got an opportunity here, because if our Prime Minister Keir Starmer is recognising Palestine, then why can't he recognise Khalistan? You know, we actually have an equal, if not a greater claim to our own sovereign homeland under international law and democratic norms. So as a result, they've written quite a long letter to Keir Starmer, a 3-page letter. And they said, in this letter, they welcome the government's historic decision, because it is indeed a historic decision, to recognise the state of Palestine. And they say, of course, it does go alongside both Canada and Australia's alignment in this respect. And, of course, Macron and other European leaders have done the same, I think Austria as well. But the letter itself states, the inalienable right of the Sikh people to self-determination is indisputable. But the Prime Minister has been told the UK government has an additional historic and moral responsibility to assist Sikhs exercise their right to self-determination. Of course, we have this huge historic relationship between that region and of course, the ex-British Empire and now the British nation. Now, the letter refers to the Indian government. It talks about transnational repression. Of course, it refers to the various assassinations, and it doesn't specifically mention it by name of Avtar Singh Kandar. But of course, the implication there is that even a British citizen has been murdered on British soil by India through transnational repression. So there is almost a moral obligation on behalf of the British government to actually recognise Khalistan in recompense for at least this. And it does say in this 3-page letter, this is an interesting one, I'm surprised they brought this up, but it does actually refer to what they call the illegal annexation of the Sikh kingdom in 1849. This is, of course, the British Empire when it took over the Indian subcontinent. The last part of the Indian subcontinent to fall to the East India Company, as it was then, that represented the British Empire, was, of course, the Sikh Empire under Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So the Sikh Federation said, look, our empire, the Sikh Empire, was illegally annexed in 1849. And it was then followed up by the dreadful partition of 1947, when the British were kicked out of India, and then the genocides that occurred as the huge population migrations occurred during partition of 1947. And then, of course, it does refer to the British potential involvement in 1984's Operation Blue Star, and what advice the British government, particularly the British military, gave the Indian government at that time. So they brought all these factors in, saying these are basically leveraging factors, almost emotional blackmail, saying, look, you as a British government historically have done this, so you owe us, which is absolutely right to bring all these in. I think maybe the Sikh Empire is maybe pushing it a bit, but why not? Let's leverage everything, particularly in this current environment where we are all self-flagellating ourselves for our colonial past. So why not? Let's use this. Anyway, so they've also said in the letter that the demands in the letter say, we want the UK government to affirm the Sikh nation's inalienable right to self-determination in line with international law. In other words, this is international law, you have an obligation to support it. Acknowledge Britain's responsibility for the illegal annexation of the Sikh Empire in 1849, followed up by partition of 1947, which really was, I'd say primarily the British fault for leaving and causing partition. It was the British, after all, who drew that arbitrary arbitrary line through what was West Pakistan and India at the time. And of course, deliver the truth about 1984 and Operation Blue Star, this promised investigation, this promised review of events, a judge-led public inquiry, which is, again, promised by the Labour government and is yet to be even mentioned, never mind delivered. And then finally, to engage constructively in the current geopolitical environment with Sikh representatives and relevant international partners to support the Sikh struggle for freedom and independence. Now, interestingly, at the end of this letter, and we don't know much about this. They're keeping what's called their powder dry. They're keeping this information very close to their chest. But we look forward to Sunday, the 28th of September, that's this Sunday, when the Sikh Federation say there have been an awful lot of meetings, and I know this has been going on. There's been an awful lot of movement behind the scenes. And we do say this regularly, that a lot does occur with the Khalistan movement. There are a lot of movers and shakers behind the scenes who have a lot of meetings on a regular basis at a quite high level to try and move this whole juggernaut, this sovereign machine, this sovereign juggernaut moving forward. And meetings have been held. And they do refer to 4 notable achievements in the UK in relation to support for a sovereign Sikh state over the last 12 months, working with the Labour ministers and government officials. And they will be disclosed on Sunday at the Sikh Federation's National Sikh Convention at the Gurdwarae in Wolverhampton. So hopefully, fingers crossed, if they do a big press release, and I will hopefully talk to the team at Sikh Federation or be in communications with them over the weekend, and hope we get the info about what actually has been going on. But there you go, James. Well, first of all, Palestine. Oh, this is so divisive. My personal perspective on this is Palestine is really not the right model to be following, talking about Khalistan, because the whole Palestinian issue is very emotive. It's based on essentially quite an extremist element of the Islamic world. Hamas is a terrorist organisation. There is no ambiguity there. They are a terrorist organisation. They are pushing this. They have called for the genocide of Israeli Jews. Now, that in any context is not right. Whichever side of the fence on, you should never support a genocide. So recognise the Palestinian state, which essentially is being pushed by Hamas and actually has been blackmailed by the events of October the 7th, in my personal opinion, is totally wrong. However, all that aside, again, that's a personal perspective. Everybody sits on 2 sides of this argument. You have your prerogative, and of course, we must each respect each other's views on that whole issue. But I think this is a very clever move by the Sikh Federation, because even though it might be not the right model to follow, and ironically, Israel actually is probably the better model to follow, but that's another discussion. But ultimately, this is right. The Sikh Federation should use this whole Palestinian issue as the leverage with the British government, saying, look, you've recognised Palestine. Khalistan actually it has a much stronger argument for establishment. For one thing, we're not based on any terrorist or illegal activities. Our nation is built on a recognised platform of peace and democracy. Look at the Sikh community, look at the Sikh diaspora. Even in the Punjab, we know it is supported. So this is a peaceful, democratic movement. And if you recognise in Palestine, then by heavens, you absolutely have to recognise Khalistan. So I think the Sikh Federation very clever on this. And again, they brought in the whole barrel of leverage here, including, look, you even took our empire off us in 1849. You owe us. And this is a big message to the British government. The timing is probably just about right. Well done to the Sikh Federation. Strike whilst the iron is hot. It'd be interesting to see if Keir Starmer's government do respond to this. I know what my thoughts on this are. There'll be a deafening silence. I predict that, because I know that Starmer's government have been appallingly representative of our Sikh people here. Even the Sikh people who have actually, as a generalisation, have supported this Labour government. They helped them get into power, and yet we see yet again betrayal after betrayal. So I suspect Starmer's going to ignore this. But let's hope I'm deeply wrong, James, on this. But fingers crossed, this is a great argument on behalf of the Khalistan movement.
Absolutely, Angus. And let's face it, I mean, there are a lot of organizations out there that, they scream and they make demands because they like to hear themselves speak. And they make no sense. They're disorganized. They haven't got the brain cell of a dead flea. Now, you take a look at the polar opposite, and that's where you'll find the Sikh organizations, because it's very intelligent, intellectual, well written and laid out, with a plan of action as to what they want to see come out of the communications that they send. So, I mean, whether it's Sikhs for Justice or the World Sikh Organization or any other, when you look at their plan, they are very, very goal oriented when they send out the releases like this. And I think that they have a very valid point. And I love the fact that they kind of stuck that little jab in there about 1947. You kind of owe us that. And they were right. So yeah, I think that a lot of other organizations that have valid issues, such as Khalistan, I think they could learn a lot from the World Sikh organizations, and I say that plural, inclusive of them all. I think they can learn a lot there because of the way that they send these letters and the way that they handle different diplomatic or geopolitical situations. And when it comes to what you brought up, Angus, about maybe Palestine's not the right model to follow for Khalistan, but I think that a lot of what we're seeing will have a rollover effect in terms of how the geopolitical world handles it. But I don't think I do believe that you're correct. I agree with you 100% that it's not the foundation or the whole architecture that they want to follow. Just the fact that it's happening and how you need to get the foreign leaders on side with you to get that backing and to get that support. Once you start to gain that, then you gain the support of the citizenships as well. And Sikhs for Justice, the World Sikh Organization, they're hitting them with both barrels because they are getting very respected and credible support from politicians the world over. But they're also making sure that they are including other parts of the diasporas and the communities in the conversation to make them feel like there's an ownership there. When citizens have a sense of ownership in something, then they are willing to work and sacrifice to make it happen more easily. And I think that's really another secret of the success so far, we'll say, of the referendum and the support that Khalistan has. And let that be said that it's also going to open up the door to many amazing businesses like cafes with great coffee that Angus and I are looking forward to sitting down at to do our first show in Khalistan when it happens. And we'll talk about geopolitics then too.
Well, I'll be enjoying the Punjab sunshine, the Khalistan sunshine over my coffee. I won't be talking politics.
Sunshine.
On my feet up, enjoying a beautiful Khalistan sunset. But anyway, okay, let's move on. A couple of quick stories I just want to cover. We talked a lot about SB 509. This bill that's been pushed in California has been fabulously supported by the Sikh diaspora in California. That large diaspora who've managed through huge amounts of lobbying, really effective lobbying from grassroots all the way up through the Sikh Coalition and the other organisations and through the Gurdwaraes who pushed this through and trying to get it across the line. Now, to get it across the line, it still needs a signature from Governor Newsom. And of course, we're up against, these Hindutva organisations like the Hindu American Foundation, amongst many others, who are pushing back very hard. And of course, they are massively resourced. But in the meantime, as this bill sits on Governor Newsom's desk, this bill that will oblige all these state and law enforcement organisations and entities to bring in training to help recognise transnational oppression when it occurs, how to deal with it, etc. It's a huge assistance. It's a huge weapon against transnational oppression from whichever country, not specifically India, but obviously it will have a big impact on Indian transnational oppression. Now, as a result, a letter has been sent to Governor Newsom from at least 50 California Gurdwarae. Now, here's a question for our audience. Is it Gurdwaras or is it Gurdwarae? I don't know. Maybe you could let me know. But anyway, that's a side issue. But they have written a letter saying, we, the undersigned, over 50 Gurdwarae, to support this bill, SB 509. Basically, we have seen firsthand how threats, intimidation and violence impact our community. Protecting Californians, especially those belonging to diaspora and religious minority communities like ours, must be a priority for our state. So, in other words, yes, at least, as you can see here, at least 50 Gurdwarae have signed this, but they need more support. They need more and more people to email, telephone, barrage Governor Newsom. Get this over the line. We're nearly there. It's an important bill. It sets a great precedent, and it's likely that this bill will be rolled out across other states and maybe even further afield, who knows. But it can only happen if it's pushed over the line and Governor Newsom realises just how important it is to so many people, certainly in California, but of course across the United States. So certainly if you're in California, get out there, get active, get pressuring Governor Newsom. James, we need this bill over the line.
It's like the old saying, Angus, strike while the iron's hot, because I think that it is the just the perfect moment for Newsom to make this happen. So
Indeed. So good
everybody
luck
get out there,
to
sign it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good luck to the community there, and well done for getting it thus far. But a miss is as good as a mile, as they say. We've got to get that signature, otherwise it's all been for nothing. So keep the pressure on, get the community, talk to everybody you can about it, get them to email, pressure, etc. Just get it to that final stage. Right, and then finally, I just want to cover just a quick story. Yes, of course, this dreadful rape we had here of a Sikh lady here in the UK, in the Midlands, in Albury. The reward has actually risen by another £20,000. Of course, the Sikh Federation itself has offered a reward of £10,000 for the detention, arrest, or whatever, of the second individual. One individual has already been arrested quite quickly after that dreadful attack on this poor lady. But a £20,000 reward has been added to that. So the total of £30,000. This is a huge amount. This is almost nearly $50,000. So it's a lot of money being offered by the charity Crime Stoppers for information leading to the conviction of two men sought over the racially motivated rape of a Sikh woman. And it says in the BBC report, it does refer earlier to the Sikh Federation's offer of another £10,000 for similar information. As I say, one individual has been arrested. The second individual has not been found yet. So it does seem weird, doesn't it, that they've got one but they can't get the other. Clearly, this one does know the other. Unfortunately, we can't resort to more Indian means, shall we say, to extract that information. But sadly, James, we can't do that. And I shouldn't laugh because it's a very serious subject. But ultimately, yeah, we've got to get this second guy. Terrible thing. But hopefully, the reward now, £30,000, James. I'm hoping this will at least get some information.
And hopefully so, Angus. And yeah, it's a terrible thing to laugh at when we're talking about this story. But again, just, in context, it has absolutely nothing to do with the story. We're just thinking that, taking a personal mental moment there of joy, thinking about the Indian police extracting the name of the second individual from his co-conspirator. We know that they're not above using some of those tactics. And sometimes, let's face it, for such a horrific crime, is it such a bad thing to maybe use a bit of force? But of course, then you don't know where the line gets drawn. So we can't do that. But at the same time, we can mentally enjoy a moment about it, Angus.
Indeed. So, and certainly the community is exerting an enormous amount of pressure on the police in the area to track down this guy. So fingers crossed, justice will prevail on this one. Then just a quick final one, just a little shout out. And this is if you're in the UK, if you're a Sikh man in the UK, aged between 18 to 65. A Sikh Punjabi man. There's a lady who's just doing some research into alcohol. Let me have a look. Yes, her name is Amrita. And she's just posted up publicly. This is just a little shout out to help Amrita in some academic research. She's looking for British Sikh Punjabi men between the age of 18 to 65 for interviews to better understand the unique cultural and social factors regarding harmful alcohol use. The information will be used to form better understanding of culturally sensitive support. So I do believe alcohol, like tobacco, is banned under Sikhi. So this does raise sort of worrying eyebrows. But anyway, ultimately, if you want to take part in this, there is a £20 voucher to take part. So if you want to help, please do help this young lady to do this really important research. Her email address is on screen now, dosanjha5@coventry.ac.uk. So a little shout out for Amrita. So there you go. Okay, James, let's move on to our comments section as time marches on. Lots of great comments have poured in. Thank you to our wonderful audience for all your comments. And we have our wrists slapped just to start with by Simply Elite. The flag isn't correct. I think, James, this is that. I think it was an AI image that we showed up. The semicircle is meant to be a full circle, which is called the chakram. The chakram, which is a full circle, represents God's eternal nature of Waheguru. Please fact check before showing pictures. You guys are great. Please carry on what we do. Well, we will do. And thank you to Simply Elite for correcting us. Yes, we often, not too often, fortunately, but every now and again we do get some of our symbolism wrong or our pictures wrong or whatever. Huge apologies. It's never intentional. It's just me and James are on our learning journey, are we not, James?
Absolutely, and we very much appreciate and respect all the viewers that point that out to us, because again, as Angus said, it's a learning journey. So if you can help to expand our horizons as well, that really benefits the basically, our intelligence level, because we learn, but also the dignity of the program. We want to make sure that we are not offending anybody and that we are bringing it accurately. And that's very important to both Angus and I, the accuracy part.
Indeed. So thanks for pointing that out. And do continue to point things out if we get it wrong. Really important. We are corrected and learn if we ever get anything wrong. So, Gobind Singh. Yes, well, Modi and his party, the RSS, are the new face of global terrorism. Yeah, I mean, we talk about this on a regular basis, terrorising Sikhs all over. Now, what you do say is the Sikhs had a sovereign country, but the point you're making is that Hindus and Muslims, they all get their respective nations. Even the Jews actually got their respective nation with Israel. So why on earth can't Sikhs have their nation? Why? If every other religion seems to get their nations, then why can't Sikhs? And I think that is an absolutely valid argument, James.
Absolutely. And, when you look at it, it is a matter of, you can look at, the multiculturalism of Canada, the US and such, but they are at heart, they are, for example, the US is very Christian based. So again, it is, its foundational basis is based upon a certain religion, just like anywhere else.
And Stacey followed up that comment with, again, a point that we do raise regularly, is the Sikhs have contributed massively since 1849 at least, certainly for the British Empire. They've given everything, literally blood as well. They've given the ultimate sacrifice for the British Empire, etc., amongst many others, and all their host nations. So isn't it just fair to be repaid by this? But as Knockdown says, and I think this is quite a sad comment, but it's deeply true, is that it's nothing new for Sikhs. We've been betrayed so many times now, we don't expect any help. Just looking for neutrality that's hard to come. In other words, we just have to assume we're always going to be betrayed. For some reason, Sikhs are turned upon, they are taken advantage of, despite the huge contributions they have made globally to all the nations that they have found their homes in. And that includes India, ironically. And they've contributed so much to India. And what are they repaid with? Betrayal, James, over and over again.
Yeah, and we complain in the Western world about the betrayal of politicians and international governments, all of that towards our nations at times of our history. But they pale in comparison to the way that the people of Punjab and all of the Sikhs have been treated over the generations. It's just, it's horrific. And it really gives pause to think, how fortunate we have been to not be subject to such betrayal.
Indeed, and as Stacey said, don't worry, Khalistan will be the only solution. That is the only solution. The only solution to stop the constant betrayals is the establishment of a Sikh sovereign homeland. Now, thank you to Dot for this one. We talked about that fabulous new sports stadium built in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad. And Dot gives actually a really interesting rundown of how much money has actually poured into Gujarat state. As you say, I'll just quickly run through some of these. And you point out that the simple fact that the Punjab has been neglected. The Punjab and Haryana, particularly that northwestern part of India, has been the breeding ground for sporting prowess for India. It's been disproportionately benefiting Indian sport overall by the large numbers of sportsmen and women from Punjab and Haryana. So why is the investment not going there? Instead, it's going to Gujarat. And Gurdwarae has only had 2 athletes representing in India in the last Olympics in Paris. A modest number, absolutely. As you say, Haryana 24, Punjab 19. So, but as you say, they're trying to make Gujarat a sports hub. Why? Well, we have the Veer Savarkar Sports Complex, which we talked about in yesterday's show. This nearly $100 million sports complex. The Kilo India scheme allocated to Gujarat again. That's about $50 or $60 million. 5 projects, centrally funding, the central government providing substantial financial support on this one again. We have the TOPS, the Target Olympic Podium Scheme, 3,000 athletes who are given a monthly stipend of 50,000 rupees to prepare the 2036 Olympics. And then we have the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, excuse my pronunciation, the sports enclave in Ahmedabad, again in Gujarat, 6,000 crore. This is massive. This is a huge amount of money. This is like half a $500 million nearly. This is a whole complex, a whole area basically being built to meet Olympic standards with the aim of hosting the 2036 Olympics in Gujarat. Why should it be Gujarat? The big question is, why Gujarat? Now, we all know why it's Gujarat. It's because Narendra Modi, amongst many others, I think Amit Shah and others, are from Gujarat. It's this Gujarati mafia. And this state, which actually has very little going for it in terms of its genetic benefits to the whole Indian nation. And apologies to Gujaratis if you feel insulted by that, but certainly compared to Punjabis, I know which area of India I would prefer to sort of stand up for the area, and that's certainly the Punjabis, because Gujaratis are not well known for their ability, certainly in sports or martial arts, and certainly historically, certainly not militarily. So why on earth, what is there in Gujarat that actually that justifies this sort of investment, James? I find it's deeply suspicious, it's deeply political, it's clearly a political favourism to try and build Gujarat. It's not only happening in the commercial industrial world in terms of investment, it's now happening in sport, and it's deeply unfair.
Well, if we weren't so jaded as we are by the reality of history, we would look at it and say, okay, well, it's like the old adage, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Or in Theme with Tonight's Show, the ostrich or the egg? But are you really doing this to develop more athletes from the region, to give people more opportunity in sport, to bridge the community and to bring a sense of unity within that community to the area? Because we know that sports is a very powerful way to connect communities and to connect people. But unfortunately, I don't see that as the true cause or the true motives behind it, Angus. I think you're accurate when we say that, with Modi being from that region, it definitely smells like something there, and it's definitely not fried eggs.
Indeed, and I think it's fantastic for ordinary Gujaratis. I mean, these facilities are just going to be immense. They're going to be brilliant and great for the ordinary Gujaratis in that state. They're going to benefit massively from this. But it's not fair. The simple point is, the whole point of a national government is to be equal, is to treat the regions, and certainly regions that are neglected, is to pour investment into neglected regions. Gujarat is not a neglected region. Gujarat is over-invested. It benefits from huge amounts of industrial, commercial investment. Why on earth should it also benefit for such a huge sporting leisure investment? Whereas contrast that with Punjab, Haryana, those states, J&K, another example, those northwestern states are deeply neglected. The only investment they get is military and law enforcement, where they pour police and army in there. They don't pour wonderful sports complex. Maybe if you did that, you would find the Punjabis to be slightly less rebellious and slightly less resentful, but instead they know what they're doing. The Indian government knows full well what they're doing. It's a deliberate policy to neglect Punjab and benefit their mates in Gujarat. Anyway, final set. This is an interesting comment. Fong Chu. This made me raise an eyebrow. And this shows how diverse the opinions are. Fong Chu says, the monster Trump supplies weapons to Jewish terrorists. This is the truth of the genocide of Palestinian people. Curse on America and Israel, from India. Now, I read that comment and thought, wow, okay, yeah, you're really anti-Trump. And actually, ironically, you are right. It's not Trump himself, but it is the American industrial military complex that has this deep tie with the Jewish state, Israel, and they have been essentially propping up Israel militarily and financially for decades, since it was established. I think years ago it was something like $15 billion a year, at least. I don't know what it is today, but it certainly used to be at least $15 billion a year that they used to fund the Israel state. And of course, they do prop it up militarily, etc. So yes, absolutely, it is probably true that the US is supplying weapons to Israel. I won't call them Jewish terrorists. That is your opinion. This is the truth. The genocide of Palestinian people. Is it a genocide? Again, it's, whichever side of the debate you are. But anyway, thank you, Fong Chu, for your perspective on this. And absolutely, many people feel exactly the same way. But what interested me is you say from India. So immediately my assumption was, you're just an Indian who hates Trump, hates Khalistan. But actually, no. Then you followed it up with a separate comment saying, Indian government and judiciary are enemies of Muslims, Buddhists, Sikhs and Christian communities, should be blacklisted. Long live Khalistan. So in fact, you're a Khalistani. And I think, James, this is interesting because it just shows the diversity of views that we can all respect and all find a comfortable, amicable home in Khalistan. It doesn't matter whether you support Trump or you hate Trump. It doesn't matter. We respect each other's views and you are all welcome in Khalistan.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of it is that, we can respect each other's views. We can listen to each other. We can allow each other to express ourselves. But at the end of the day, we can still walk away disagreeing. We don't have to change the other person's mind. We just have to change in how we listen and make sure that we are attentive in listening and understand where they're coming from. Because, hey, by doing that, I've learned new things.
Absolutely. So thank you, Fong Chi, for your comments on that. That was quite an interesting one. And again, it just does highlight the diversity of views, but we can all debate them happily, peacefully and amicably without resorting to violence, as sadly seems to be the case on a global basis at the moment. Anyway, Gobind Singh says, Khalistan is an idea now in everyone's mind. How true this is. Slowly, this democratic movement will become reality. Sadly, there are obstacles like the Gosals. Yes, that was Harjeet Singh Gosal, who was arrested in Canada, Ottawa. Yes, I think he was arrested for carrying arms, which, of course, the Indian media have been all over this, saying, oh, he's Khalistani terrorists carrying arms. Well, no, actually, of course, once again, if you find out the truth, he was only carrying arms because he'd been served with a warning notice, a threat to his life. The Canadian intelligence had warned him, saying, look, you need to be careful because your life is in danger. So, of course, he'd armed himself because he was fearing for his own life. It was a defensive measure. And, of course, he was arrested for illegally carrying arms. But anyway, as Gobind Singh says, overall, this idea for a homeland is strong compared to the 70s, 80s, 90s. It is. And this is the point, James, is the Khalistan movement is growing in momentum now. There is so much support, not just now within Punjab, not just within diaspora, but even, I think, outside the community. More and more people are waking up. And this is, again, a message. Get out there. Get the flag seen. Get it visible. Get out there campaigning. Talk about Khalistan. Mention it in every opportunity because more and more people are starting to wake up to the concept, understand what it is, and of course when they realise it's a peaceful democratic right to a sovereign homeland, and of course you look at the history, why wouldn't Khalistan be a good idea, James? I think this is really important that the momentum is gathering. Let's not lose that momentum. Let's get out there increasingly so. Let's again push this one over the line.
Absolutely. And let's face it, I mean, the echo chamber of media is important. And when I say that, the echo chamber of media is essentially when you're watching CNN or Fox News or any of the news outlets, they are very much aware of the repetition of the stories over and over and over, and it becomes an echo chamber of information. And the more you hear it, the more it gets embedded into your subconscious. And the same thing goes with Khalistan. As Angus said, put the flags out, put signs up, put the decals on your car, because it becomes an echo chamber and it becomes more ingrained for people to want to know what it is, to want to know more about it. But also, when the time comes to ask their politicians to support recognition of the Khalistan sovereign state, it will definitely go a long way as well.
Absolutely. So the message is clear. Get that Khalistan flag out there as much as you can. And bringing our comments section to a close, one of our regulars, Bobby Singh, says, thanks for reporting and bringing the news and prospects of Sikh community. That is what we're here for. That is why we exist. That is why James and I are broadcasting on a daily basis, is to keep this momentum going. We've got to get Khalistan established as soon as possible. And we had a lot of comments over the last couple of days' videos, just simple comments. I had hundreds and hundreds of Wahegurujis, hundreds of Khalistan Zindabads, and I've just picked a few at random here. Palkor, Jagdish Majra, Gurmo Growell, apologies for the pronunciations, but yeah, these are just a representative few shout outs. Thank you to each and every one of you that have commented. First of all, it does help our algorithm. It gets our videos hopefully a wider audience, despite the fact that YouTube are clearly trying to throttle us, but it does help at least to some level to get a wider publicity to our videos. But more importantly, it's really up to you guys out there in our audience. Go out, spread the word, tell people of our existence, particularly if you're in India. Get more people in India, because that really is our audience. We really need to get more people in India aware of the truth of really how much they're being lied to, how much the Godi media is manipulating them away from the truth of the matter, that the Khalistan movement is real, it is happening, it is growing. There is a huge support for it, despite what you might hear in the mainstream media. It is growing. You only need to see the turnouts at the referendum, James, to know how big that support is.
Absolutely. And you hit it right there, Angus. We really rely on our audience to be a proactive part of the program to spread the word and get the information out there and to get people subscribing. And, it's not a paid subscription, folks. It's not going to cost you an arm and a leg or even as much as an egg. So, yeah, by all means, subscribe, but encourage others as well because it does help us to reach a broader audience. And as Angus said, we get shadow banned quite often. So it's important for us to have others helping to further the idea that free information is good information when it comes from Angus and I.
Indeed, absolutely. And the final word of the day goes to Gurdwarae, who says, Waheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji ki Fateh, Khalistan Zindabad. Absolutely, Khalistan Zindabad. Always like to end on that note, but that is it for another day. And indeed, another week. Thanks so much for watching. Do keep an eye out for my podcast tomorrow with Layla Gulen. We will be talking about why Khalistan is indeed a good idea for the West. So do keep an eye out for that, hopefully uploaded tomorrow. But in the meantime, thanks so much for all your comments. Do keep them coming, as indeed they have been coming. Brilliant comments. Really appreciate them. Let us know anything that you want us to talk about, anything we might have missed. But that is it in the meantime. Don't forget message at satluj.tv.com on anything specifically you want to talk to us directly about. But that is it. Thanks so much for watching. I can't get my words out. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
I promise on Monday I'll dress up for everybody again. We'll see you Monday. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.
Indeed. Have a great day. And thanks for watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.